In 2021, professional cyclist Colin Strickland wrote for Outside Online, "Will you triumph or will you fall to pieces? Both outcomes are equally respectable." His words were about gravel racing, a raw, unforgiving sport that exploded in popularity during the pandemic, offering a brutal test of endurance for those daring enough to ride. Unlike road racing, gravel is anything but a team sport. It's a fight for survival on two wheels, where every rider is a potential ally or a foe. No games, no tricks, just raw, gritty competition. But the question of whether you triumph or fall apart isn't just reserved for the race course. For some, it becomes a matter of life and death. And when emotions get tangled in that competitive fire, things can quickly spiral out of control. The tragic case of Anna Maria Wilson, known to friends as Maria, is a dark reminder of how fragile life can be when personal ambition and hidden resentments collide. At just 25, Maria was on the cusp of superstardom in the world of off-road bike racing. Already regarded as the best female rider in America, her promise was undeniable. But she wasn't just racing against her competitors. She was also unwittingly caught in the middle of a love triangle, a situation she had worked hard to avoid. It was during the whirlwind world of gravel racing that Maria first met Caitlin Cash, a fellow cyclist who, though not as competitive as Maria, had carved her own path in the sport as a weekend warrior. Their connection was immediate, the kind of bond that only comes along once in a lifetime, a friendship that blossomed in a world often defined by competition. Maria, a rising star, and Caitlin, an amateur with a knack for the sport, became fast friends. Caitlin had a dual life, living in Austin, Texas, but also owning a property in Vermont, near where Maria's family lived. It was an interesting connection, as Caitlin had become close with Maria's family long before the two women ever met. Still, Maria was always aware of Caitlin, a name whispered through the racing circuit. When Maria traveled across the country for races, she would often sleep wherever she could, sometimes in the back of a van, sometimes in cheap rentals, living the humble, unglamorous life of a professional cyclist. But when she visited Austin, she always had a place to stay at Caitlin's loft apartment above a garage. The comfort of that friendship became a rare anchor in her busy and unpredictable life. On May 10, 2002, Maria flew into Austin Bergstrom Airport, prepared to compete in the 150-mile gravel locos race, a grueling test of strength and endurance. Caitlin was there to pick her up, their excitement palpable as they reunited. In the hustle of catching up, however, Maria forgot her luggage at baggage claim, forcing them to return to the airport. Once back at Caitlin's apartment, the two friends settled in, sharing Caitlin's bed and talking through the night, laughter spilling into the early hours. The next morning, Caitlin made coffee and breakfast, while Maria, always focused, always determined, assembled her $15,000 lightweight racing bike in the living room, the one tool that would propel her toward the top of her sport. At some point, Caitlin pulled out her phone, snapping a photo of Maria as she left for a 3-hour training ride. She sent it to Maria's mother with a simple caption, "Your girl is in safe hands here in Austin." But what happened next would change everything. As Maria rode off into the Texas heat, Caitlin also left the apartment, locking the smart lock on the front door behind her. She'd been out with friends, planning to return late, but before leaving, she'd given Maria her personal key code for the smart lock on the front door, ensuring that Maria could come and go as she pleased. The lock was equipped with an app that notified Caitlin every time it was used. At 4:30 p.m., Caitlin received the first notification. Maria had come back and unlocked the door, only to relock it moments later. Then, at 5:55, another alert. Maria had left again, securing the door behind her. Caitlin knew Maria was meeting Colin Strickland, a fellow cyclist, for dinner that evening. But it wasn't until 8:36 p.m. that Caitlin received another alert. The same code had been used to unlock the door, yet, strangely, the door was never locked behind Maria. By the time Caitlin returned just before 10 p.m., the door was still wide open. Inside, something was wrong. As Caitlin walked toward the bathroom, she saw Maria's feet sticking out from around the corner. At first, she thought Maria was just resting, maybe stretching her back, but as she approached, she rounded the corner and saw a horrifying sight. A massive pool of blood had spread across the floor. Maria was lying there, unresponsive, her body cold and still. Caitlin immediately dialed 911 and placed the call on speakerphone while she began CPR. For the next 10 excruciating minutes, she performed chest compressions, hoping for a miracle. But when EMS arrived and took over, it was already too late. Maria had been dead for over 45 minutes. The medical examiner's report confirmed the horrific truth. Maria had been shot 3 times, once in the forehead, once in the temple, and finally, a single deliberate shot to the chest. The bullet lodged in the tile floor beneath the exit wound, revealing the killer's chilling precision. The shooter had stood directly over Maria and aimed the final, fatal round straight into her heart. It was clear that whoever had done this, it was personal. But the question on everyone's mind was, who would want Maria Wilson dead? Maria had been something special from the moment she was born. Her mother, Karen, always knew there was something extraordinary about her daughter, an undeniable force of energy that seemed to guide her every step. Maria was born on May 18, 1996, during a violent lightning storm in Eastburg, Vermont, a small town nestled in the Northeast Kingdom, an area known for its breathtaking natural beauty and outdoor activities. It was a place perfect for skiing and mountain biking, and Maria was drawn to both from an early age. Her family was no stranger to elite athleticism. Maria's father, Eric Wilson, had competed with the U.S. national ski team, while her mother, Karen, had also been on the team and later became a cycling instructor. Her aunt, Laura, had represented the U.S. at the Winter Olympics in cross-country skiing. Strength and endurance ran through Maria's veins, and by the age of 8, she was already skiing competitively. But as Maria grew, it wasn't just her physical abilities that set her apart. It was her demeanor, her drive, her almost otherworldly focus. Rowan Garrity, who later wrote about Maria for Bicycling.com, described her as someone who seemed untouched by the darker impulses that so often define human nature. Those who knew her spoke of her with reverence, as if she were destined for greatness. After high school, Maria was accepted into Dartmouth, the only school she'd applied to, and she joined the school's competitive ski team. However, a series of injuries hampered her performance, and by 2019, Maria had graduated with a degree in engineering. It was then that she decided to pursue professional bike racing, an endeavor she'd been passionate about since childhood. Working with a trainer, Maria underwent a series of tests to assess her potential, and the results were staggering. Her functional threshold power numbers were on par with those of World Cup-level athletes. It wasn't long before Maria became a rising star in the world of cycling. She moved to San Francisco, where she continued to train and race, while also working as a demand planner for Specialized Bikes, the same company that had built her first mountain bike when she was just 7 years old. But then the pandemic hit. Corporate offices closed, races were canceled, and the world came to a halt. Yet for Maria, this was an opportunity. While the world shut down, she pushed herself harder than ever. She trained relentlessly, preparing for the day when competition would return. And when it did, the world was ready. Bike sales soared, with gravel racing becoming a standout among cycling enthusiasts. In the midst of this rise, the sport's brightest star was none other than 34-year-old Colin Strickland, a seasoned gravel racer who was widely considered the preeminent figure in the world of off-road cycling. As the gravel racing scene continued to rise in popularity, Colin Strickland had become its poster boy, dominant on the course and a recognizable face for the sport. Before the pandemic, he had been a fixture in the competitive cycling world, gracing the covers of magazines and writing articles for Outside Online, all while being sponsored by Red Bull. His rise to fame was cemented in 2019 at Unbound Gravel, the sport's biggest race, where Colin outpaced a field of professional road racers, including those from the Tour de France, to win in emphatic fashion. That victory made him not only the king of gravel racing, but a symbol of the sport's legitimacy and growing popularity. When racing resumed in 2021 after a pandemic hiatus, Maria Wilson was quickly proving herself a formidable talent. She won smaller races and showed remarkable promise in bigger competitions. By the fall, Maria was dominating almost every race she entered, and it was clear she was on the verge of becoming the sport's next superstar. This was when she first met Colin Strickland, a meeting almost destined to happen, given the overlapping circuit they both raced on. Despite the cutthroat competition on the course, gravel racing fostered camaraderie, with racers often training together, camping and socializing post-race. Though Maria was just beginning her ascent to the top, she still had much to learn, and Colin, as a seasoned racer, became an informal mentor. They began trading tips on training and sponsorship deals, with Colin even offering Maria advice on how to secure lucrative sponsorships. Their first training ride together took place after a race in Arkansas, marking the beginning of their growing connection. It was during this time that Maria and Caitlin Cash met for the first time as well, sparking a friendship between the two women. In the beginning, there was nothing more than a platonic relationship between Maria and Colin, but that would change. A few weeks later, Maria visited Austin, Texas for another race, and coincidentally, both Colin and Maria had recently ended their respective relationships. During that week, Maria stayed at Caitlin's apartment, which is when the two women became close friends. But it was also the week when Colin and Maria's relationship began to evolve into something more. It didn't take long before others in the racing community began to notice their growing closeness, including Colin's ex-girlfriend, Caitlin Armstrong. Caitlin began bombarding Maria with calls, demanding she stop seeing Colin. The ex-girlfriend was clearly still living with Colin, and the situation became increasingly complicated. The relentless calls from Caitlin forced Maria to block her number entirely. Caitlin Armstrong, a 33-year-old from Detroit, was a yoga enthusiast and a self-made professional. She was a successful realtor and had a side business with Colin where they refurbished and sold antique travel trailers. But despite her own athleticism, Caitlin was not in the same competitive league as Colin and the other top gravel racers. Her relationship with Colin began in 2019, and by 2021, it was clear that their lives were deeply intertwined, romantically, socially, and financially. Yet, cracks had begun to form. Colin was growing frustrated with Caitlin's insistence on dragging him to yoga classes and her love for fast fashion, which he found increasingly sidelined as Colin's racing career grew more successful. The tension between them boiled over during the October race in Arkansas when Colin went on a training ride with Maria and another female racer. When Caitlin asked to join, Colin told her she would only slow them down. Their relationship hit a breaking point, and shortly after the race, Colin and Caitlin agreed to break up during a 9-hour drive back to Austin. But just a week later, Colin and Maria's relationship became romantic, while Caitlin seemed to be moving on as well, going on a few dates of her own. Despite this, Colin and Caitlin were still living together and running their business, and within 5 weeks, they were back together. But Colin had never officially informed Maria of the status change, leading to further confusion. At this point, Colin seemed to be in relationship limbo, unsure about what he wanted, but it was clear to others that he still hadn't communicated the full extent of his feelings to either woman. By January 2022, when Colin, Caitlin, and Maria all attended a race in Arkansas, the situation was awkward. Colin was seen between the two women at dinner, and the tension was palpable. Afterward, Maria sent Colin a text message expressing her confusion about the situation and asking for clarity. She wanted to know if they were just friends or if something more was going on. Colin apologized for making her feel uncomfortable and explained that bringing Caitlin along had been a mistake, but he never directly addressed the core issue. Instead, he told Maria that their relationship was strictly platonic. However, in the weeks that followed, Colin's behavior grew even more cryptic. He changed Maria's contact name in his phone to Christine Wall and began deleting their text threads, claiming it was all in an effort to maintain a professional relationship with her while avoiding tension with Caitlin. What Colin didn't realize, however, was that Caitlin had access to all of his devices, including his computers and phone, since they lived together and shared passwords. This meant Caitlin could see everything Colin had been sending to Maria for months, and it seemed that the secrecy was only deepening the rift between them. While Colin may have thought both women were unaware, Caitlin had likely known for some time. As Caitlin Armstrong's obsession deepened, she began stalking Maria Wilson online, starting with Maria's social media accounts and her Strava profile. Strava, a fitness app, displayed GPS maps of Maria's training rides, revealing the exact locations she began and ended. On May 11, 2022, Maria's ride from Caitlin Cash's apartment was logged, inadvertently confirming for Caitlin where Maria was staying. That same day, Maria texted Colin Strickland to ask if he had plans for the evening. Hours later, Colin invited her out. Maria sent him the address, 1708 Maple Avenue, Apartment B, so he would know where to pick her up. It's unclear if Caitlin intercepted this message, but what followed strongly suggests she had. At 6 p.m., Colin arrived on his motorcycle and picked Maria up. They went to Deep Eddy, a popular community pool, for a swim. While there, Caitlin repeatedly called and texted Colin, but he ignored her. One of her texts even suggested grabbing dinner, but Colin did not respond. By 6:30 p.m., Caitlin had armed herself with a 6-hour P365 handgun that Colin had bought her and drove off in her black Jeep. Meanwhile, Colin and Maria shared burgers and drinks, blissfully unaware of Caitlin's growing rage. Security footage later revealed Caitlin's Jeep circling the area near Maria's apartment for nearly an hour, predatory and deliberate. At 8:35 p.m., Colin dropped Maria back at the apartment. Moments after Maria entered the building, her friend received a notification that the front door had been unlocked, but it was never locked again. At 8:36 p.m., Caitlin's black Jeep pulled into the alley. Simultaneously, Colin sent Caitlin a text, possibly to create an alibi, saying, "Hey, are you out?" He claimed he had been delivering marijuana to a friend and that his phone had died, even suggesting they grab food together, just half an hour after dining with Maria. At 9:15 p.m., a neighbor's doorbell camera recorded the horrifying sound of Maria's final moments. First, a scream pierced the night, followed by 2 gunshots in quick succession. There was a brief silence, and then a third, fatal shot rang out. It was clear from the scene that the last bullet had been delivered with cold precision. Later that night, Caitlin returned home, shared whiskey with Colin, and spent the evening as though nothing had happened. When detectives informed Colin the next morning that Maria had been murdered, his shock was genuine. Security footage showed Caitlin's black Jeep near the crime scene, identifiable by a distinctive bike rack, and her handgun was soon identified as the murder weapon. Yet, during her interview with police, Caitlin refused to cooperate, asked for a lawyer, and was ultimately released due to an error in a years-old Botox arrest warrant. While Colin initially appeared as a suspect, investigators quickly ruled him out. Multiple security cameras had captured Colin leaving Maria's apartment well before the murder, and his phone records confirmed he was home during the crime. Caitlin's alibi, however, was conspicuously absent. Her phone had been turned off between 7:30 and 9:30 p.m. the night of the murder. Friends of Caitlin later came forward, revealing disturbing comments she had made months earlier about wanting to kill Maria, remarks they had dismissed as dark humor. On May 17, 6 days after Maria's death, ballistic tests confirmed that Caitlin's handgun matched the murder weapon. But Caitlin had vanished. On May 13, she sold her black Jeep for $12,000 in cash, took an Uber to the airport, and flew to New York the next day. From there, she disappeared. It wasn't until May 25 that investigators discovered Caitlin had used her sister's passport to board a flight from New York to San Jose, Costa Rica. She had taken refuge in the surfside town of Santa Teresa, calling herself Ari, teaching yoga on the beach, working at a hostel, and even undergoing $6,000 in plastic surgery to alter her appearance. She cut and dyed her hair, attempting to erase her identity. Yet her dedication to yoga became her undoing. U.S. Marshals, suspecting she might continue teaching or practicing yoga, circulated her description to international agencies. It wasn't long before Costa Rican authorities located her at the hostel. On June 29, Caitlin Armstrong was arrested and deported back to the U.S. During her trial in 2023, Caitlin's defense argued for her innocence, but the evidence was insurmountable. Her handgun, GPS records from her SUV, and her attempts to alter her appearance spoke volumes. Even her dramatic escape to Costa Rica and subsequent plastic surgery highlighted a guilty conscience. Adding to her downfall was an escape attempt just 19 days before the trial, when she picked a lock on her handcuffs and fled from a doctor's office, only to be recaptured half a mile away. The jury deliberated for just 2 hours before convicting her of premeditated murder. Caitlin Armstrong was sentenced to 90 years in prison. As Maria's family and friends delivered their heartbreaking statements, one sentiment loomed large: the senselessness of it all. Maria Wilson, a young woman with boundless potential, had been caught in the crossfire of a one-sided rivalry she likely never understood. Her mother, Karen, poignantly reflected that a simple conversation might have prevented the tragedy. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling mysteries. See you in the next one.